Hi, my name is Rachael Eben, and I'm with 8th Mountain Ranch, and we are coming back to you with the second episode of Outside the Round Pen. For those of you that are just tuning in or you don't know what this is about, we are a ministry that focus on working with rescuing the equine and partnering them with at-risk youth with horses and the children and broken families, and just allowing the Lord to minister to them in sessions. But this specific series is actually geared more towards showing what we're doing with the horse side of things. So our three main pillars of the ministry are to rescue, redeem, and release. And so we're emphasizing through partnering with our neighbor's horse named Josie, just what that might look like, both for her in the process of developing and growing in partnership and relationship and becoming a partner that potentially could go outside of just our neighbors' ownership, but also to some other people in the future, hopefully. But at least making her sound, and as well as our partnership with the Lord. So what it looks like to have things being worked on inside the round pen and the parallels that are drawn with outside the round pen, hence the name. So thanks for joining us. Last episode we talked about just the first couple times that I was able to work with Josie and what that looks like with our walk with the Lord, and how when we're allowing someone to trust, or allowing there to be trust with someone that you've never really interacted with before, how that can be scary, and boundaries are a big part of that, and there are walls that can come up. And so this week I'm going to talk about the third time that I worked with her and how it was so fascinating. With horses, you start with something that we're working with an animal that speaks a different language than us, right? So as humans, we have a more goal-oriented, we do things more sequentially. Even if you're a creative mind like mine, you do things in order. There's a rhyme and reason to stuff. Horses have a tendency, they do have a rhyme and reason, and they do have a way of evaluating their circumstances and situations and producing an outcome that they want to do, but it's less thought through, and it's more in games. They process and work through games. They're constantly thinking one step ahead of things. They're naturally skeptical. They're not naturally loyal like a dog. And so when you're learning how to work with a horse or interacting with a horse that you haven't before, it's a big step towards them. And it can be almost more scary that you're talking something similar to their language, because they're used to humans not. They're used to us interacting with them the way that we talk to each other. So with her, it was starting very interesting. She had to allow me in to trust just being in her space. And it's just, it's step by step, allowing a little bit more each time that we work with her. But the last time that we worked with her, it was really, in the natural, it could look like it was a complete step back. And I'll explain that a little bit in detail. But in the spiritual world, that doesn't, like when we're in our relationship with God, when we don't necessarily accomplish something in a society that's so goal-oriented and academic and achievement-oriented, we serve a God that's not his heart. He's so much more about the relationship that's built and the trust that's built in the interim, that the outcome for him is still a win. And horses are big on, they don't hold grudges, but they do remember. And so the last point at which that you leave a training session with a horse is where you're starting at the next one. And so to explain that a little bit more, when you look at a training session, or when you look at interacting with a horse, you start with a goal in mind. But with them, you have to be very flexible on time and allow it to take as much time as it needs to take. Don't try and pressure them into things, because if you do, they will mess up your plan and your agenda every single time. They're just very good at that, because that's not the way that they work. They're not bound by time like we are. And so when you start it, you're looking for wins. A horse learns in 2 to 3 tries. We take like up to 20 something just to start a habit and all of that crazy stuff. Like our processing is much slower. They are very intuitive and they read direction internally. They read intention like a book. And so when you go into something, the whole heart behind your ask, whatever you're asking, it can be as simple as, hey, I just want to pet you. And it's not actually a training scenario. The way that you ask that and the way that you're honoring their boundaries that day, which change just like us. Every single day, we're dealing with things internally. We might not feel great. Maybe we woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe we're running late for something and we're feeling pressure. And all of that comes out in our responses to very little asks from people around us. Horses are the exact same way, but they don't have a way to reason it and then express that to us to be like, hey, here's my context. This is what I'm dealing with right now. So if you're asking me, this feels like a very, very, very big thing, even though I know it's not. So just give me a little bit of time or a little bit of grace. They can't say that. We can, but sometimes even we forget to do that. And it takes a lot of maturity to be able to express that to someone, especially that you don't trust, right? Because you're making yourself very vulnerable to be like, here's my process. I'm going to lay it all on the table and you can see everything. It's very vulnerable. And horses, in a way, they don't do that naturally. They don't have the ability in their thinking process, but they also don't just in the way that they interact with each other. So they are looking for the way that you ask to be honoring. And again, going back to it, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's not the task. It's not what you're asking. It's the way you're asking. And so when you're looking at that, when there's a win for a horse, or that's the language that we use with the training, it's something so small. It can be something that's it's rewarding them for trying. When they don't know what you're asking and they're like, well, what about this? That's a win by removing the pressure to say, I see your try and I'm going to honor that. See how that language, that tone in the way that I'm expressing that makes someone, our alarm bells and the guards come down when they're like, oh, okay, so I'm not going to get punished every time I try something that's wrong. I'm going to be rewarded for simply trying. That's a big deal for a horse, and it's building trust. But honestly, that's the way the Lord works with us too. He's not standing there going, oh, nope, incorrect, shame, how dare you. But a lot of us, our own thought processes, our own internal voices will tell us that we did something wrong, and we'll beat ourselves up over something as simple as, you dropped that, butterfingers, oh my gosh, and the self-talk just goes to this place of complete condemnation. But that doesn't help anyone, it doesn't help you, and our God doesn't do that to us. He's not embarrassed by our clumsiness or our inability to show up sometimes. In our humanity, in the fallen nature, that's part of every day. We're working through that, but that doesn't change the fact that we're made in His image, and our spirit man is perfect, and it is walking in a way that we can rise to the occasion. But if we don't shame ourselves, or if we're not asking ourselves to rise to an occasion at the same level and standard as we were yesterday, which might have been a perfect day. We were running on high just as far as everything was going really smoothly. You felt good. Your body was at its full capacity. You got enough sleep. You got enough food, enough water. Just basic necessities were met and more. That's a different capacity level than if we are down super low. We didn't get enough sleep. We are running on empty. We're highly stressed. There's a lot of emotional trauma or anything like that happening. That's two different levels. And I'm speaking to myself when I talk about this sort of thing. It's not easy to keep in mind the fact that what you're asking of yourself, or what the Lord is asking of you, it's from an outside perspective, but He actually has the wisdom and the knowledge to be able to address what you're dealing with also. And so when I'm working with Josie, I'm watching for those sort of things. I'm looking at her going, what's your context? Is there something that you're not able to process through, or that it's a bigger ask today than it was yesterday? Because every day is new, right? Even in the Word, in the Bible, it talks about every day we've been given new mercies, because there's new things that get thrown at us just from everything's fallen, and circumstances and weather and all of that. It's outside of our control, but we have the ability to control our internal process and the way we respond. But sometimes even that's a challenge, and the Lord is there to walk alongside us and guide us. And that's what I'm trying to do for her, but she has to learn to trust. And there are areas of our lives or with her that it's really challenging to let someone in. And so the third time I worked with her, it was something that I went in, it started really, really well, but then very quickly I read that she was not wanting connection, and I'm not going to force that. It's not love and it's not honor to force her to have a connection with me when she doesn't have it to freely give. And so that's a big emphasis we have. My parents taught me that culturally in our family, but also in the way that I relate with everyone. If someone doesn't have it to freely give and you're demanding it of them, then there's that builds the opportunity for there to be resentment and then anger and hatred. And that would be completely working against my desire to build trust with this horse. Same with people. And so all I was asking for her to do when I first went in, my initial thought was, I'm going to see where we're at, because every day is different, right? Taking that in mind. But the last time we worked, it took us 15 minutes and she was open and ready to put a halter. I put a lead rope on her and rubbed her down, and she was super content with that. There were some moments where it was a little bit unsettling because it was new. It was a new conversation, but she wasn't afraid, and she was trusting me, and she was trusting my leadership. When I went in the other day for the third time, it was I don't know what the dynamic was that I walked in on. There's context there that I will never see, right? But she was very, very quick to let me know, I don't have as much vulnerability on offer today. I'm not wanting or feeling safe enough to let you all the way in. So it was like 40 minutes of me just asking her to yield, even a little bit, just a glimpse of it. And she was so locked down and afraid, which is funny because horses don't, when they're afraid and it's not a big life-threatening thing, it looks very similar to being insubordinate or stubborn. And that gets miscommunicated often. And that's one of the reasons that I love the Word, and I love the way that it guides us in our ability to work and interact with other people and the Lord, because it comes out in the same way that I interact with my animals. Now, they're not they're not the same level, right? The Lord didn't die for animals, but that is our creation that was given to us to rule and reign over, and we have the ability and the calling as sons of God to have honor shown towards creation around us. And the Word even Scripture talks about, it's crying out for the sons of God to show up, to show up and operate in dominion and protect and honor them in their design, because they were created for a purpose just like us. Not the same purpose, but they have one. And when we abuse and neglect our own heart and our own character, often that gets taken out on the creation around us, including our own temples, right? This is a temple of God. And when we do that self-talk, like I was talking about before, it's berating and hurting and condemning something that God's given us to steward. It's not perfect by any means, and we have all got our flaws that we really we just don't like. But He loves who He sees who we were created to be, and that's how He is calling us to walk. But He doesn't condemn us when we don't show up to that standard. And that's what I'm looking at with Josie. I'm like, she has so much potential. There's so much inside of her. If she was just able to trust me, there would be so much that she doesn't even realize how much would be unlocked for her and her destiny and her purpose. But I'm not gonna overstep and try to force that on her, because I'm like, I'm giving you a new thing. I'm giving you a good thing. I'm giving you a gift. Why won't you take it? That's not honoring. And no matter how much I try to convince her of how good of a gift I have, she's not going to take it because of the way that I'm giving it to her, the tone of voice that I'm wrapping that gift in. And so when I went in, it was just I was looking for tiny little things, just a little ability to be able to walk through it with her. And that was it. The very end, I received just a little touch. She stepped out and she touched my hand, and I took that as a big deal because it was a small invitation. It was I'm willing to meet you here. This is terrifying for me, but I will give you this. I'm going to trust you. And I want to honor that because that was a really big try for her. Looks like something tiny to us, but it's a big deal. And so the Lord is so good at that. And I just want to encourage you in that this is something, it's an ongoing thought process. It's something that you need to continuously walk in to be able to renew your mind on the fact that He is going to ask you to do things because He's a good God and He gives good gifts, but He's only going to go at your pace because He loves you. And that invitation doesn't bring shame. It's designed to bring honor and the ability to trust Him more. So thank you so much for joining us for the second episode of Outside the Round Pen. And this is really exciting. It's a good adventure. And keep tuned in, and we'll see you next week.